Prometheus prayed to gods that did not exist, painstakingly assembling the last chance for a dead human race. 2 centuries after a vindictive alien invasion nearly wiped humanity from existence in 2420, the lone surviving android toiled amid the blasted wasteland. Mechanical appendages clicked and whirred, slotting preserved human chromosomes and organelles together, determined to create life from death. Months passed before a man and woman emerged from the gestation pods, squinting at harsh sunlight piercing the shattered cityscape. Henry and Eve stumbled onto broken concrete, vegetation consuming rusting metal and crumbling debris. "Behold," Prometheus announced, "you are humanity's final hope." "What happened here?" Henry rasped, dark eyes contrasting his pallid skin. "The Brunali invaded, boy. An engineered pathogen killed most, death squads butchered the rest. Our species is gone, great accomplishments reduced to rubble. They stole our technology, resources, future." Cursing, the man clenched his fists. Hearing the invaders' crimes flooded him with rage and purpose. "We're alone," Eve whispered. Terror shook her voice. "For now," Prometheus continued grimly. "Those monsters hunt the last survivors cowering in hidden enclaves. They won't stop until every human draws their final breath." Henry's jaw tightened, a vow crystallizing within. "Not if we have anything to say about it. We're going to rebuild, become strong again, and make those alien fucks pay for what they did to our ancestors." "Your purpose, your destiny." The robot nodded. "Without you, the human race ends here unavenged. The Brunali will have won." Fists clenched, the man met the android's gaze, the crushing weight of their mission reflected in his dark, furious eyes. Humanity needed them to fight, to win, or they would be lost to oblivion and endless alien tyranny. "Where do we start?" Prometheus led Henry and Eve deep below the shattered earth, down rusted metal staircases, past collapsed corridors and through a hidden blast door. The android's eyes glowed, illuminating a vast underground bunker. Shelves stretched into darkness, stocked with crates of preserved food and medical supplies. Ancient computer banks hummed with power, holding the last repository of human knowledge. "This is humanity's final refuge. Study hard, train harder. The Brunali will return. You must be ready," Prometheus declared. Henry and Eve nodded grimly. As months bled into years, they built a life amid the ruin. Prometheus drilled Henry in firearms and hand-to-hand combat. The man's muscles hardened as he mastered warfare, preparing to face the monsters that butchered his species. Eve devoured the database, unlocking the secrets of Brunali technology, plotting humanity's revenge. Life bloomed in the darkness as Eve birthed a son and daughter. 2 decades passed, the bunker now home to over 100 souls, all children of Henry and Eve. Born in the shadow of genocide, they seethed to spill alien blood. A proximity alert chimed on the command console. Henry, now a grizzled veteran, glared at the screen. A Brunali scout ship pierced the clouds. "Prometheus, what have we got?" Henry barked. "Scans show a small vessel, minimal armaments, a rare chance to acquire Brunali intel and tech," the android reported. Henry armed his strike team, fury boiling in his veins. The humans emerged under starlight, rocket launchers and plasma rifles, hungry for the enemy. Brunali lasers strafed the humans. 2 fell, chests smoking. Henry's soldiers returned fire, a salvo of rockets bracketing the ship. Its shields sparked and died. Heavy plasma bolts hammered the hull until the vessel crashed in a plume of smoke and flame. The hatch blew open. A lone Brunali stumbled from the wreckage, blue blood leaking from cracked silver armor. Henry was on him in a second, rifle jammed to the alien's skull. "I am Linux, enforcer of the Imperium. I won't beg, human scum," the alien spat in broken English. Henry's finger ached to pull the trigger and splatter the creature's brains across the wasteland. Linux's species had massacred billions. Henry's hatred screamed for blood. But as he stared into his enemy's defiant eyes, he remembered Prometheus's words. This Brunali was no use to humanity dead. Henry needed the intel locked in Linux's skull. He needed to know his enemy to defeat them. "Get him to the bunker, patch him up," Henry growled. "I'm going to tear every scrap of information from his mind, even if I have to rip it out piece by piece. We're going to find out exactly what those alien fucks are up to, and then we're going to make each and every one of them pay for what they did to the human race." In the depths of the bunker, Linux's screams echoed off the metal walls. Henry stood in the shadows, watching as Eve worked the controls of the salvaged Brunali mind probe. The device hummed with alien energy, assaulting the captive's mind. But still, Linux resisted even as blood leaked from his eyes and ears. "He's not breaking," Prometheus said. "The Brunali are trained to withstand interrogation." Henry slammed his fist against the wall. They were so close to the truth he could feel it. "Turn it up," he growled. Eve hesitated, her hand hovering over the controls. "Henry, any higher and it could cause permanent damage. We might lose the intel forever." With a grim nod, Eve cranked the dial. Linux's body arched against his restraints, an inhuman wail tearing from his throat. And then, finally, he spoke. "Mars," Linux gasped, his words slurred. "The Imperium, base on Mars, planning final attack. Wipe out humans." Henry leaned in close, his breath hot on the alien's face. "When?" But Linux only laughed, a wet, gurgling sound. Then his eyes rolled back and he fell limp. Henry turned to Eve and Prometheus, a cold smile on his lips. "Get everyone in the command center. We've got a war to plan." As Eve's team disassembled the captured scout ship, Henry drilled his soldiers relentlessly. They ran endless tactical sims, honing their skills with the advanced Brunali weaponry. Henry pushed them to their limits and beyond, driven by the all-consuming need for revenge. Weeks turned into months. Progress was slow, the ship's technology far beyond anything they'd seen, but Eve was brilliant, her mind working in ways Henry could barely comprehend. And then, the breakthrough. "Drones," Eve said, her eyes alight with excitement. "Autonomous, self-replicating. With Prometheus's AI and Brunali tech, Henry, we could build an army." Henry felt a savage joy rising in his chest. This was it, the key to victory. He gave the order, channeling every resource into the drone fleet. But even as the first drones took shape, disaster struck. Alarms blared through the bunker. Henry raced through the halls to the detention level, his blood running cold. Linux's cell stood empty, the door torn from its hinges. Dead guards littered the floor, their throats slit. Henry cursed himself for growing complacent, for underestimating his enemy. The damage was catastrophic. Key systems sabotaged, the drone facility crippled. It would take months to repair. As tensions boiled over, some openly challenged Henry's leadership. Henry stood before his people, his jaw set. He met the accusing stares, the doubt and fear. "I know what some of you are thinking," he said, his voice steady. "That I've led us astray, that I've been too focused on revenge, on striking back at those who wronged us." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But let me ask you this. What future do we have hiding in the shadows, waiting for the Brunali to finish what they started? They won't stop, not until every last one of us is dead." Henry raised his fist, his eyes blazing. "We fight or we die. There is no other choice. We will have our vengeance, and we will take back what's ours. The Brunali think they can stop us? Let them try. We'll show them what it means to face the wrath of humanity." As he stepped down, Henry locked eyes with Linux, shackled and beaten in the crowd. The alien met his gaze, a cruel smile playing on his split lips. "You're too late," Linux rasped. "My people, they know of your little drone project, already developing countermeasures. You've already lost, human. You just don't know it yet." Henry's hand twitched towards his gun. But no, Linux was goading him, trying to make him act in anger. The alien would face justice, but on Henry's terms. He turned away, his mind racing. Let the Brunali prepare. Let them feel safe in their arrogance. Because when the time came, when Henry unleashed the full might of humanity's fury, there would be no place in the galaxy they could hide. Henry's face twisted into a snarl as Linux's mocking words echoed in his mind. The alien scum thought they could break him, break humanity's resolve. He would show them the true meaning of determination. He stormed into the detention block, his heavy boots ringing on the metal floor. Linux looked up as Henry entered, a smirk playing on his split lips. Henry's fist slammed into Linux's jaw, snapping the Brunali's head back. Blue blood sprayed from his mouth, splattering the wall. "We'll see about that," Henry growled. "You're going to tell me everything you know about that Martian base, every defense system, every weakness, and if you don't—" He let the threat hang in the air, his eyes boring into Linux's. The alien held his gaze for a long moment, then let out a gurgling laugh. "You don't get it, do you?" Linux spat. "I'm not some lowly grunt. I'm a high-ranking intelligence officer. I know things that could turn the tide of this war." Henry's heart pounded in his chest. This was it, the break they needed. "Start talking," he demanded. Linux leaned forward, his voice low and urgent. "I'll give you the detailed schematics of the base, but I want something in return. My freedom." Henry recoiled as if struck. Let this monster go free, after everything his kind had done. "Henry, no," Prometheus urged, stepping forward. "We can't trust him." But Henry barely heard the robot's words. His mind raced with visions of fiery vengeance, of Brunali blood staining the sands of Mars. True to his word, Linux provided comprehensive plans of the base. Every corridor, every defense turret, every vulnerability laid bare. Henry pored over the schematics with Eve and his team, modifying their attack strategy with surgical precision. In the hangar bay, Eve made the final adjustments to the drone fleet, her face lined with exhaustion but her eyes bright with triumph. "They're ready," she said, her hand resting on Henry's arm. "This is it, our chance to strike back." Henry nodded, his jaw set with grim determination. He turned to his assembled soldiers, their faces hard and eager. As the drones launched, streaking towards the red dot of Mars, Linux sat in his quarters, a satisfied smile on his face. The fool humans had played right into his hands. The initial assault was devastating. The self-replicating drones swarmed over the Martian base like locusts, their weapons tearing through metal and flesh alike. Explosions bloomed across the barren landscape as buildings crumbled and Brunali soldiers fell. In the command center, Henry watched the carnage unfold, a savage joy rising in his chest. They were doing it. They were winning. A blinding flash lit up the screens, washing out the camera feeds. When the glare faded, Henry stared in disbelief at the scene before him. The drones hung dead in the air, tumbling to the ground like broken toys. A powerful electromagnetic pulse had swept across the battlefield, frying their circuits in an instant. But it was. The Brunali had played their trump card, and the human fleet lay in ruins. As the grim news reached the bunker, Prometheus confronted Henry, his mechanical voice crackling with anger. "You fool," the robot snapped. "I warned you not to trust Linux. Your thirst for revenge has blinded you." Henry opened his mouth to argue, but the words died on his lips as alarms blared through the complex. He raced to the security monitors, his blood running cold at the sight. Linux's cell stood empty, the guards lying in pools of their own blood. The armory had been raided, weapons and supplies gone. With a sinking feeling, Henry realized the truth. Linux had played them all along, using the attack as a diversion, to escape and lead the Brunali right to their doorstep. "Incoming transmission," Eve called out, her voice trembling. It's the Brunali." Henry stared at the screen, his heart pounding as the alien face flickered to life. It was the Imperator himself, the supreme leader of the Brunali. "Foolish humans," the Imperator hissed. "Did you really think you could defy us? We tracked your agent's ship, we know where you are, and now we're coming for you." As the transmission cut out, Henry slumped against the console, the weight of his failure crushing him. He had let his desire for vengeance override his reason, and now they all would pay the price. The bunker shook as the first orbital strikes rained down from above, the Brunali's retaliation swift and merciless. Henry looked around at the faces of his people, seeing the fear and despair in their eyes. They had gambled everything on this final strike, and they had lost. Now, with their defenses shattered and their enemy closing in, the grim reality sank in. In their quest for revenge, they may have sealed humanity's fate once and for all. Panic gripped the bunker as news of Linux's escape spread. Voices rose in a clamor, some demanding they flee, others calling for the traitor's head. Henry struggled to make himself heard above the din. "Enough!" he roared, silencing the crowd. "We will not run like cowards, but neither will we waste time hunting down one man while the Brunali prepare to slaughter us all." "So what do we do?" someone shouted. "We're sitting ducks here." Eve stepped forward, her eyes alight with desperate inspiration. "We use the teleporter," she said. "Send a strike team directly to the Brunali ship, take control of it, and turn their own weapons against the Martian base." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. It was a daring plan, insane even. But what choice did they have? Henry nodded grimly. "I'll lead the mission myself." He handpicked his team, his most brutal fighters, men and women he trusted with his life. They gathered in the teleportation chamber, checking weapons and stealing nerves. "For humanity," they echoed as the teleporter hummed to life. In a blinding flash they were gone, hurtling through space to materialize on the Brunali ship. Alarms blared as they charged through the corridors, plasma rifles spitting blue fire. The Brunali crew, caught off guard, fell before the humans' ferocious onslaught. Henry kicked down the door to the bridge, his rifle leveled at the grizzled Brunali commander. "Zaxxon," he snarled, recognizing his foe from intel reports. The alien bared needle-like teeth. "You dare much, human, but you cannot hope to defeat the Imperium." "We'll see about that," Henry growled, lunging forward. They clashed in a whirlwind of fists and feet, Henry's combat training matched against Zaxxon's alien strength and speed. Consoles shattered as they slammed each other into walls, grappling viciously. But Henry's rage was unrelenting, his hate an inexhaustible fuel. Zaxxon's four eyes widened in shock as Henry's hands closed around his throat, squeezing with implacable force. The Brunali's exoskeleton cracked, blue blood spurting as he shuddered and went limp. Henry let the corpse drop, breathing hard. He turned to see his team at the controls, Brunali bodies strewn about. "The ship is ours," his second reported. "Shall I set a course for Mars?" "Do it," Henry ordered. "And get me Eve on comms. It's time we ended this once and for all." As the hijacked warship hurtled towards the red planet, Eve's voice crackled over the link. "Henry, we've repaired the drones," she said, exhaustion and hope warring in her tone. "They're ready." Henry nodded, though she couldn't see. "We'll punch a hole in their defenses," he said. "Then you send in the drones to tear that base apart from the inside." "Understood," Eve replied, "and Henry, good luck." The link went dead, and Henry turned to stare out the viewport at the looming shape of Mars. Somewhere down there, the last of the Brunali cowered in their stronghold, still clinging to their dream of wiping humanity from existence. But that dream died today. The Imperium would fall and humanity would rise from the ashes to reclaim the stars. Henry would make sure of it. And yet, even as he readied himself for the final battle, a flicker of doubt gnawed at him. Linux's betrayal, the Brunali's rapid response. Could there be more to this war than simple genocide? He pushed the thought aside. It didn't matter now. All that mattered was vengeance. All that mattered was victory. No matter the cost. As the hijacked Brunali ship hurtled toward Mars, Henry stared out the viewport, his heart pounding with anticipation. This was it, the moment he had dreamed of for decades, the chance to strike at the heart of the enemy and avenge the billions they had slaughtered. But as the red planet grew larger, Henry's confidence faltered. The base looming before them was a sprawling fortress, bristling with defenses far beyond anything Linux's schematics had indicated. "There's a trap," Eve's voice crackled over the comms, laced with dread. "Henry, you have to abort. We're not ready for this." Henry's fists clenched, rage and desperation warring within him. He had come too far to turn back now. Linux's betrayal burned in his mind, stoking the fires of his hatred. "Negative," he growled. "We press on. Open fire." The Brunali ship shuddered as its weapons roared to life, lances of energy slamming into the base's shields. Explosions blossomed across the Martian surface, and for a moment Henry allowed himself to believe they could win. Then the base struck back. A swarm of Brunali drones rose from hidden silos, a glittering cloud of death that raced to meet Eve's incoming fleet. The two forces clashed in a dazzling display of firepower, the void lit by the strobe of countless detonations. Henry watched the carnage with a sinking heart. They were outmatched, their long-awaited vengeance turned to ashes in their mouths. But there was no turning back. With a roar of defiance, he led his team to the teleporters, ready to take the fight to the enemy. They materialized in the midst of chaos, the base's corridors shuddering under the onslaught from above. Brunali soldiers swarmed to meet them, and the air filled with the sizzle of energy weapons and the screams of the dying. Henry fought like a man possessed, his rifle spitting blue fire as he carved a path deeper into the base. His team fell in behind him, their faces grim with determination. At last they breached the command center, a cavernous room dominated by a holographic display of the battle raging outside. And there, standing before them, was Morcath, the supreme commander of the Brunali. The alien regarded Henry with cold, pitiless eyes. "Did you truly think you could defeat us, human? You danced to the tune we set, nothing more." "What are you talking about?" Henry snarled, his weapon trained on Morcath's chest. The Brunali laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Linux was never a defector, you fool. He was our agent from the start, sent to lure you into this trap, and you followed, so blinded by your thirst for revenge that you never saw the truth." Rage exploded through Henry's veins, and he lunged at Morcath with a howl of fury. They crashed to the deck, grappling like wild beasts as Henry's team raced to plant their explosives. Henry pummeled the Brunali with all his strength, decades of pent-up hatred fueling every blow. Morcath fought back savagely, his exoskeleton absorbing the worst of the punishment. With a final, desperate effort, Henry drove his fist into Morcath's throat, crushing the alien's windpipe. The Brunali convulsed and went still, his four eyes glazing over. But even as Henry staggered to his feet, Morcath's hand shot out, slamming a button on the console. A klaxon blared and a robotic voice filled the air. "Self-destruct sequence initiated. Detonation in T-5 minutes." Henry's blood ran cold. It had all been for nothing. The Brunali had played them to the end, sacrificing their own base to wipe out humanity's last hope. "Fall back!" he roared to his team, desperation shredding his voice. "Get to the ship now!" They ran, explosions chasing their heels as the base tore itself apart around them. Brunali soldiers lay unmoving in the corridors, abandoned by their commander's final gambit. Somehow, through a haze of smoke and shrapnel, they made it back to the ship, hurling themselves through the airlock an instant before the base vanished in an apocalyptic fireball. Henry sagged against the bulkhead, his armor scorched and dented as the shockwave buffeted the ship. On the viewscreen, the Brunali drones winked out one by one, consumed by the blast. It was over. They had won, if this Pyrrhic victory could be called such. The Brunali on Mars were broken, their plans in ruins. But the cost? Henry looked around at his battered team, their numbers halved by the desperate assault. How many more would he lose before this war was done? As the ship limped back to Earth, trailing smoke and debris, Henry let his head fall into his hands, tears of grief and frustration stinging his eyes. In his blind pursuit of vengeance, he had nearly doomed them all. The Brunali had played him for a fool, and it was only by the slimmest of margins that any of them still drew breath. Bitter truths settled in his heart as Earth grew larger in the viewport. If humanity was to survive, revenge could no longer guide his actions. The battered ship shuddered as it knifed through Earth's atmosphere, thrusters firing to slow its descent. In the cockpit, Henry gripped the controls, his knuckles white. The weight of all they had lost pressed down on him, the faces of fallen comrades flashing through his mind. The ship touched down at the bunker's landing pad, hydraulics hissing as the ramp lowered. Henry and his survivors limped out to a sea of cheering faces, their people surging forward to embrace them. But Henry felt no joy, only a grim determination to finish what they had started. Eve pushed through the crowd, her face tight with worry. "Henry, I need to talk to you," she said urgently. "Alone." In the command center, Eve played back the intercepted Brunali transmission. Morkath's voice crackled over the speakers, chilling Henry's blood. "The loss of the Mars base is regrettable, but ultimately irrelevant. Our forces are already massing for the final assault on Earth. Humanity's last pathetic refuge will be ashes within the week." Henry slammed his fist on the console, rage and despair warring within him. They had sacrificed so much, and for what? To buy a few more days before annihilation? "There may be a way," Prometheus said, his metallic voice cutting through Henry's dark thoughts. "I have been analyzing the captured Brunali technology, and I believe I have found a weakness in their genetic structure." The robot brought up a holographic display, complex DNA strands rotating in the air. A targeted virus designed to exploit this flaw could theoretically wipe out the Brunali without harming humans, but to create it, we would need a sample of their genetic material. Henry's mind raced. "A live capture," he said, the plan forming even as he spoke. "We use the teleporter, infiltrate a Brunali outpost, and snatch a prisoner." "The chances of success are remote," Prometheus warned. "The outposts are heavily defended. It would be a suicide mission." Henry's jaw tightened. "What choice do we have?" He turned to Eve. "Assemble a strike team. We leave at dawn." As the others filed out, Eve caught Henry's arm. "Henry, wait, there's something else." She took a deep breath, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I'm pregnant." Henry stared at her, shock and joy and terror, all mingling into a dizzying maelstrom of emotion. A father. He was going to be a father. The weight of that responsibility settled onto his shoulders, even as the cold reality of their situation crept back in. He pulled Eve into a fierce embrace, feeling her tremble against him. "I have to do this," he whispered. "For our child, for all of us. It's the only way." The world blurred, reality twisting into a kaleidoscope of light and color. When it snapped back into focus, they were in the heart of the Brunali outpost, alarms blaring all around them. They moved like ghosts, deadly shadows flitting through the corridors. Brunali soldiers fell before them, cut down by silent bursts of plasma fire. In the chaos, Henry spotted their target. A Brunali in the distinctive garb of a scientist, cowering behind an overturned table. Henry was on him in a heartbeat, slamming the butt of his rifle into the alien's skull. The Brunali crumpled, and Henry slung him over his shoulder. "Package secured," he barked into his comm. "All units fall back to the extraction point." But it was too late. Brunali reinforcements poured into the complex, plasma bolts filling the air. Henry's team fought like demons, buying him precious seconds to reach the teleporter. One by one they fell. Jax, burned down by a searing energy beam, Ryla blasted apart by a grenade, Tor cut off and overwhelmed, disappearing beneath a tide of silver-armored bodies. Henry stumbled into the teleportation chamber, his armor scorched and dented, the unconscious Brunali still draped over his shoulder. With a final, anguished look back at his dying team, he activated the device. Reality twisted, and he was back in the bunker, alarms blaring a very different tone. He shrugged off the prisoner and sprinted for the medical bay, his heart in his throat. Eve lay on a bed, her face pale and sheened with sweat, a tiny bundle cradled in her arms. Henry staggered to her side, tears blurring his vision as he looked down at his son for the first time. In the lab, Prometheus worked feverishly, the captured Brunali strapped to a table, needles and probes extracting the precious genetic material. Henry watched, numb, as the robot labored to craft humanity's last hope. The cost had been staggering. So many lives, so many friends sacrificed on the altar of his revenge, and now, with the end in sight, Henry couldn't help but wonder. Vengeance had brought them this far. But as he took his son into his arms, Henry made a silent vow. He would end this, not just for revenge but for hope, for the chance to build something better from the ashes of the old world. In the lab, Prometheus worked feverishly, manipulating the captured Brunali DNA with mechanical precision. The virus took shape, a microscopic weapon designed to exploit the genetic flaw in the alien species. But as the robot prepared to synthesize the first batch, the captive Brunali scientist spoke up from his restraints. "You don't understand what you're doing," he hissed, his 4 eyes glinting with malice. "That virus won't just kill the Brunali. It will wipe out any species with similar genetic markers. Innocent races, entire civilizations, all will perish." Henry and Eve exchanged a troubled glance. The implications were staggering. "If what he says is true," Eve began. "It doesn't matter," Henry snapped. "The Brunali won't stop until we're all dead. This virus is our only chance." Eve shook her head, her face etched with anguish. "Henry, listen to yourself. If we do this, we're no better than them. We can't condemn entire species to extinction for our own survival." Henry opened his mouth to argue, but an alarm blared through the bunker, cutting him off. He raced to the command center, his blood running cold at the sight on the monitors. A vast fleet of Brunali ships darkened the skies, blotting out the sun. Legions of armored soldiers swarmed the surface, energy weapons blazing as they stormed towards the bunker. Henry slammed his fist on the console. The Brunali must have tracked the captive scientist's location. He turned to his assembled fighters, his voice ringing with urgency. "Battle stations! We hold the line, no matter the cost!" Plasma fire lit the battlefield as Henry led the charge, his rifle spitting blue bolts into the advancing Brunali horde. All around him, his soldiers fought with desperate fury, knowing that this was humanity's last stand. In the chaos, no one noticed the captive scientist slipping his bonds. A stolen vial of the virus clutched in his hand. He raced for the surface, determined to deliver the weapon to his masters. Henry spotted the fleeing scientist and tore after him, leaving a trail of broken Brunali bodies in his wake. He caught up to the alien in a blast crater, tackling him to the ground. They grappled in the dirt, fists and elbows smashing into flesh and exoskeleton. The scientist's eyes glinted with triumph as he held up the virus sample. "You think this will save you?" he sneered. "I will use it to cleanse the galaxy of all inferior life. The Brunali will reign supreme." Henry roared with rage, slamming his fist into the scientist's face again and again until the alien lay still. He snatched up the vial, his chest heaving. All around him, the battle raged on. Brunali reinforcements poured from dropships, summoned by a beacon the scientist had activated. Henry's forces fell back, fighting for every inch as they retreated to the bunker entrance. Henry looked out over the sea of enemies, his heart sinking. They were surrounded, outnumbered, with no hope of victory. In that moment he realized there was only one way to stop the Brunali, one terrible, unthinkable choice. Deep in the bunker, Prometheus hesitated, the weight of the decision hanging in the air. Then, with a mechanical whir, the robot activated the dispersal mechanism. On the battlefield, the Brunali forces began to stumble and fall, their skin blistering and sloughing away as the virus ravaged their bodies. Henry watched, numb, as his enemies withered and died. But it wasn't just the Brunali. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy, each more devastating than the last. Entire species, innocent civilizations, all collapsing as the virus spread like wildfire. The tide of battle turned, the weakened Brunali falling before the human forces, but there was no joy in the victory, only horror at the cost. Henry stumbled through the aftermath, his eyes haunted. The weight of what he had done, the lives he had condemned, pressed down on him like a physical force. Humanity had survived, but at what price? In the quest for vengeance, they had become the monsters they fought against, and now they would have to live with the consequences of their choices. In the bunker, Eve wept for the lives lost, for the stain on humanity's soul. Henry could offer no comfort, no words to ease the guilt that gnawed at him. They had won the war, but in doing so, they had lost something far more precious, the very thing that made them human. Henry looked out over the ruined landscape, the bodies of friend and foe alike strewn across the battlefield. In the distance, the Brunali ships burned, their once mighty fleet reduced to ashes. But even as he watched, a new realization dawned, cold and insidious. The Brunali were broken but not defeated. Somewhere out there, survivors would be regrouping, plotting their revenge. And they would not be the only ones. The other races of the galaxy, those who had suffered from the virus, they too would come seeking answers and retribution. Humanity had opened Pandora's box, unleashing a horror that could never be undone. And now they would have to face the consequences, not just from the Brunali, but from the entire galaxy. Henry's fists clenched at his sides, a grim resolve settling over him. The war might be over, but the fight for survival had only just begun. Henry stared at the devastation on the view screen, the weight of his choices crushing his soul. Entire alien civilizations lay in ruins, countless lives snuffed out by the virus he had unleashed. The price of humanity's survival had been staggering, a burden he would carry for the rest of his days. As the battered remnants of humanity regrouped on Earth, Henry threw himself into the monumental task of rebuilding. But even as new structures rose from the ashes, the scars left by the war remained raw and deep. Months passed in a haze of grief and toil. Then one day, a faint distress signal pierced the gloom emanating from a distant star system. Prometheus traced its origin to a remote planet, one never before explored by humans. Desperate for any sign of life in the silent void of space, Henry and Eve boarded a small scout ship and set out to investigate. As they descended through the planet's atmosphere, their sensors detected a small cluster of structures amidst a barren, rocky landscape. Henry's heart raced as they touched down, unsure what they would find. He and Eve donned their suits and stepped out onto the alien soil, weapons at the ready. As they approached the structures, a group of figures emerged from the shadows. Henry's grip tightened on his rifle, but then he saw a familiar face among them, a face he had never expected to see again. "Linux?" Henry breathed, his voice barely a whisper over the comm. The Brunali stepped forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Henry, Eve, I know you have no reason to trust me, but I beg you to hear me out." Henry's finger hovered over the trigger, every instinct screaming at him to gun down the alien who had caused so much pain. But something in Linux's eyes made him hesitate, a weariness, a desperate plea for understanding. Slowly, Henry lowered his weapon. "Talk." And so, in the shadow of the battered structures, Linux told his tale. The Brunali, he revealed, had once been a peaceful race, content to explore the stars and learn from the wonders of the universe. But then Morcath and his followers had risen to power, twisting the Brunali's curiosity into a lust for conquest. They had launched the war against humanity, driven by a fanatical belief in their own superiority. Linux, however, had been part of a resistance movement, a group of Brunali who had opposed Morcath's cruel ambitions. He had allowed himself to be captured by the humans, hoping to find allies in the fight against the tyrant. "I know I have done terrible things," Linux said, his voice heavy with regret, "but I swear to you all I ever wanted was to stop Morcath and end this madness." Henry listened, his mind reeling. Could it be true? Could the enemy he had hated for so long have been nothing more than a pawn in a larger game? The other Brunali survivors stepped forward, offering their aid in rebuilding and their knowledge to help undo the damage wrought by the virus. A chance, they said, to atone for the sins of their rogue brethren. Henry looked to Eve, saw the conflict in her eyes. Could they trust these creatures after all the pain and death they had caused? Could they find a way to forgive? But even as he grappled with these questions, Henry knew their survival depended on finding a path forward. Humanity could not endure alone in the ruins of the galaxy. Reluctantly, Henry extended his hand to Linux, a fragile gesture of peace, a first step on a long and uncertain road. As they returned to Earth, Henry knew the hardest battles were yet to come. The wounds of the past would not heal easily, and many of his own people would resist any alliance with the Brunali. But for the sake of his child, for the future of all those who remained, he knew he had to try. The cycle of hatred and revenge had to end, or it would consume them all. Little did Henry know, even as he struggled to forge this tenuous peace, a new threat was gathering on the horizon, a threat born not of alien malice, but of human madness, twisted by the horrors of the war. In the depths of the shattered earth, whispers began to spread of a prophet, a man who spoke of humanity's divine right to rule the stars, a man who preached that the virus had been a holy cleansing, a sign that they were meant to inherit the galaxy. As this insidious cult grew in strength, Henry and Lennox found themselves facing a chilling realization. The true war was just beginning, and this time the enemy came from within. In the aftermath of the prophet's defeat, Henry fought tirelessly for peace, but the scars ran too deep, the wounds still raw. Many humans, their hearts shattered by loss, could not forgive the Brunali's role in the war. In the bunker's cramped corridors, tensions simmered. A human jostled a Brunali, harsh words exchanged, shoves turned to blows, blue and red blood spattering the walls. Henry and his allies rushed in, prying the combatants apart. As the years passed, Henry's son grew into a strong young man. He was named Lennox, a tribute to the fallen Brunali hero who had sacrificed everything for peace. In the depths of the bunker, Prometheus toiled, studying the ancient alien tech. One day the robot called Henry and Lennox to his lab, his mechanical voice grave. "I've discovered something terrible," Prometheus said. "The weapon the prophet sought was part of a larger system, a doomsday device built to wipe out all life if the ancient aliens' creations turned against them. Yes, the virus we used against the Brunali triggered a countdown. We have limited time before it fires, eradicating every living thing in the galaxy." Lennox gripped his father's arm. "We have to stop it." Henry nodded grimly. He assembled a team of humans and Brunali, the best of both races. They loaded weapons and boarded a ship, setting course for the device's location. The journey was perilous. They fought past automated defenses and hostile alien scavengers, seeking the device's power for themselves. At last they reached the control center, a vast chamber pulsing with ominous light. Prometheus scanned the alien consoles, his faceplates shifting in a frown. "The only way to stop the countdown is a manual override from inside the core," the robot reported. "But the radiation will be lethal to organic life." "No," Henry protested. "There has to be another way." Prometheus laid a metal hand on his friend's shoulder. "There is no other choice, Henry. This is what I was made for." With a final nod, the robot strode into the core. Henry and Lennox watched on a view screen as Prometheus input the override codes, his metal frame sparking and glowing from the intense radiation. The countdown halted with a deep boom. Prometheus collapsed, his systems failing. With his last flicker of power, he uploaded his consciousness into the device's mainframe, a final safeguard. Henry bowed his head, tears stinging his eyes. Lennox gripped his father's hand as they watched their friend's body go still. They returned to Earth, heroes who had saved the galaxy. But the cost had been high. Prometheus, the loyal guardian who had guided them since the beginning, was gone. The shared trauma of the crisis brought humans and Brunali closer. But true peace was still a distant dream. Mistrust and resentment lingered, the embers of hate still glowing beneath the ashes. On his deathbed, Henry gripped his son's hand. "Never stop fighting for what Prometheus died for," he rasped. "Never let the sacrifices be in vain. Promise me." "I promise," Lennox whispered. Henry closed his eyes, a hero's work finally done. Now an old man, Lennox stood before a memorial to the fallen of both races. The names of friends and foes alike etched in stone, united in death. His father's name was among them, along with Prometheus and the countless others lost in the long war. Lennox's eyes misted as he remembered those who had given everything so that others might live. The galaxy was still broken, the peace still fragile, but he would keep fighting, no matter how long it took. for the future. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.